If your life could be exactly the way you wanted it, what would it look like? Welcome to Clear the Noise Radio, where we interview real people about real hang-ups. Join us as we help you clear what is blocking you from health, happiness, and success. Now here's your host, writer, speaker, musician, and travel enthusiast, Jessica Crew.
Welcome to Clear the Noise Radio. We're here today with Melissa McBride, who we've had on the show before. She spoke on women in Islam as Melissa converted to Islam about 2 years ago and really has a wonderful story about her journey through researching different religions to kind of find where she feels she's found a home. Melissa is a good friend of mine and is a very interesting person. I don't see her as somebody who necessarily fits in nice, tidy little boxes. She is, of course, a Muslim, but rocks out to Christian music in her car. In fact, we recently had a trip to the Indiana Dunes, and on the way back, we were definitely rocking out to some Christian music. So she's very interested in a lot of different ways that people connect with God. And we've had a lot of conversations about how we connect to God and how we relate to this idea of God and then how we present that into the world. But more specifically, one of the things that she's been struggling with lately that's been on her mind a lot is this question of, well, it's an age-old question really, of if God is good, why do we suffer? And so we're really going to kind of delve into that today and look at aspects of how we were taught to think about this and what the struggle is now. So without further ado, I want to welcome Melissa McBride to the show. So thank you for being with us, Melissa.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always fun.
Yes, and I'm sure we'll have you on here many, many times as you and I like to talk.
That is true.
So let's go ahead and get right into it, Melissa. I'm kind of curious to know a little bit more about what you've been thinking about with this topic. If God is good, why do we suffer? So I guess to start off everything, Melissa, what have been things that have been on your mind with this topic?
Well, I hope this doesn't come across as selfish, but what I've been exploring probably in the last week is my own suffering. It almost seems like since I hopped onto a more straight and narrow path, my own suffering has been something I've been challenged to reconcile with and face a little bit more intimately. I think largely in part because I'm not in this rat race of life in the sense that I'm, partying and doing all these things that I kind of used to do. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
I was thinking about this the other day, actually, and the way that I was taught growing up because I was a PK, pastor's daughter, is what it stands for. We have our own little lingos. PK, oh, you're a PK? I'm a PK too. So we know what it means, but, to outsiders. So I was a PK. I was a pastor's daughter. And I think one of the big things that a lot of times sort of circulates within Christianity is that we may not understand it now, but everything has been planned for our good and God's glory. And there were two problems that I had with that. Number one, okay, so I'm thinking of a scenario of someone, I just got raped and my torture is God's joy. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I had to really kind of think through that when I started really understanding sort of the atrocities that are out there and understanding my own kinds of pain and difficulty. It was kind of almost sadistic to think that God would be happy that he would receive some kind of glory from me being tortured. That was just one of the things that was floating through my mind. And then I'll tell you the second one, and then I want to hear your thoughts. The second thing that I kind of couldn't come to terms with was that there's a being out there who would put me through pain, disease, and heartache in order to see me become a better person. So not only is this pain for God's glory, but this pain is for our good too. And so I'm sitting here thinking, if there's a being that really wants us to go through pain and heartache, then that's not even as compassionate as my parents. So that was one thing that went through my head, because I knew that my parents would try their best to have me avoid pain and misery. It would hurt them to see me go through something like that. And in fact, they raised me to have a happy life, and that's what they want to see from me. So to me, it was hard for me to reconcile this idea that God could actually ordain something that's painful in order for us to be better people and for him to receive glory. I was curious what you thought about that and how that applies to what you're going through.
What came to mind when I heard you speak is, you talk about how in your faith that you grew up in, we'll understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, we'll understand down the road, we'll understand once we die what all this meant, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're getting at?
One day, right.
That it was all for God's glory and for our own good, but how can we really believe that in the moment when it's happening? And I think of things that have been really difficult in my life that while I was going through them, I thought this isn't going to be worth it. This is just too painful, too much of a struggle, but you keep going anyways. And you look back and you're like, wow, yeah, that was really, really hard. But because it was so challenging, because I continued to push through and have faith that I would bear the fruits of the struggle, the accomplishment feels so much more incredible, And sometimes I think when I leave this earth and I, God willing, am able to meet my Creator, I look back on my life and I see that it was full of a lot of beautiful things, but also a lot of really genuine struggle, tears, face on the ground kind of things, like, this is so hard. Will heaven feel that much more blissful knowing that this life that I left behind sort of provided a contrast that made me appreciate eternal life and bliss all the more. It's like you can't know day if you don't know dark. You can't appreciate good if you haven't experienced bad, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm kind of getting to the point where I know, and I think what God seeks to do is humble us because we're not him. We are so limited in our ability to fully understand his plan. And so there are some points I'm like, I feel like I sort of grasp it, but I know that I can't, beyond a certain point, fully understand. And that's where faith comes in.
Yeah. And I think that's a big player in sort of what we're talking about today. And I just want to say for those that will be listening to this, I know that, we kind of just jumped right into some real depth here, and religion tends to be kind of a taboo topic. But the reason why I thought it'd be important to bring out today is not only because it's something that Melissa's been thinking about a lot, and I wanted to hear her thoughts, but also it's something that I think is behind us, like always sort of begging some kind of attention from a lot of people, because I don't think this is necessarily something that people really know how to reconcile. And some people have sort of reconciled it by saying, well, God isn't good, or there really isn't a God because of suffering. But I wanted to sort of delve into this a little bit because I thought it might be helpful for some people to sort of like think through where they are with this. Melissa, I'm curious to know what kind of thinking you grew up with regarding God's providence, his wisdom, and his love in times when life are unfair. Was it similar to mine?
I feel like the thing that my family always instilled in me was that I'll get through it. Whatever it is, you'll get through it. And I received a lot of love and support growing up. Most of us don't have a perfect childhood, but I was blessed with knowing that I was very loved and taken care of, and I went to good schools and all of those things, and I grew up Catholic. So I guess I knew God was there, and I had a lot of successes growing up personally. I mean, life, school, and sports and those types of things always somewhat came easy to me. So I don't think I had too many huge disappointments in the sense that I didn't lose a parent, or I didn't struggle a ton in school, all the things that are important to you as a child, right? I always had pretty easy time making friends. It wasn't until I was older that I started experiencing things that made me even have to ask these questions.
Were those things that developed later, or was it things that happened in childhood would resurface later?
I don't want to delve too much into my childhood.
Sure.
There was a lot of good, but I also experienced a tremendous amount of wounding from that experience as well. But